Hello, and welcome to WBAI's debate series for the 2021 Local Board Delegate Elections, where you will hear from various listener candidates. I am Kate Doran, election specialist at the League of Women Voters of the City of New York, and I am your moderator for this program. The topics to be discussed cover key issues facing WBAI and the Pacifica Foundation. Questions were also submitted directly by WBAI members. Please note that all viewpoints presented are those of the participants and do not reflect the position of the Pacifica Foundation or of WBAI. The program will start with opening statements, followed by a debate covering topics selected from a predefined list, and ending with questions from listener members. The order of candidates and topics has been selected by using a random sequence generator from random.org. This hour, we are joined by Cerene Roberts, Dean Loren, Michael D.D. White, Eleanor Elizabeth Forman, and Katherine O'Sullivan. Before the actual debate begins, each candidate will have 1 minute to make an opening statement. Candidates will hear a bell when their time is up. So, Cerene, we're ready for your opening statement, so please unmute yourself. Cerene, we're ready. You're the first candidate to make an opening statement.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm a little surprised that I'm first. The schedule I saw said I was third. But hello, everyone. I'm Cerene Roberts. I'm a longtime BAI staff person and longer time BAI listener person. I've run for the board most recently as a listener candidate. I'm here to serve. I want to make Pacifica all that it can be, as we say. I want to see some of the anti-racist, anti-oppression fervor that we saw boiling over into the streets of this country and around the world following the criminal racist murder of George Floyd. I want to see Pacifica bring that to the air, bring that education to the air. I want to see that in effect in our programming, on our boards, at our stations. You can reach me at cerene@justiceunity.org. Thank you.
All right. Next, we have Dean Loren. So if you will please unmute yourself, and you have 1 minute to make an opening statement. Dean Loren, you're up now. Please unmute, Mr. Loren. I suppose, Mr. Loren, we should give you another moment to unmute, but then we might have to move on to the next candidate. All right, let's go with Michael D.D. White, and perhaps we can pick up Mr. Loren at the end.
Thank you. I'm Michael D.D. White. I'm running for my second 3-year term on the board. I'm a lawyer, but a lot of you probably know me better as a troublemaking activist and writer, as a co-founder of Citizens Defining Libraries, Noticing New York, National Notice. You may notice I'm focusing a lot on getting the right narratives out there and avoiding the kind of corporate control and censorship of the narratives that we see elsewhere. My favorite motto for WBAI is radio for the 99.5%. That to me means big tent, and big tent to me means potentially big audience. There's a lot of success that the alternative left progressive media is having it tends to be on the internet these days. But we need to realize that WBAI needs to be the center of gravity drawing this back, partly because the internet is subject to censorship.
Thank you, Mr. White. Next, we will hear from Eleanor Elizabeth Forman. So please unmute yourself and you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Elizabeth Forman, and I am running against the New Day Visigoths trying to make a hostile takeover over Pacifica. I am also against any sort of frequency swap or public service operating agreement that would take away our programming freedom. And I hope to reduce or eliminate infomercials for dubious products during our membership drives. I invite you to see my candidate statement and questionnaire for more details. And you can email me at EEF as in Foreman, www@yahoo.com with any questions you might have. Put your subject line in all caps so it will stand out. Thank you, and I hope you'll vote for me.
Thank you, Ms. Forman. Next, we will hear from Katherine O'Sullivan. So I ask you please to unmute yourself and you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Hello, everybody. My name is Katherine O'Sullivan, and this is my second time running for a position on the local station board. I'm running because I want to see WBAI grow, strengthen, and thrive. We need an alternative to the mainstream narrative that is promoted on most of the other radio media stations. So we need our own place where all the diverse community voices can be heard, and BAI is the place. We offer rich, wide-ranging counter narratives, and we need to keep our independence. I voted no against the bylaws referendum. We need to keep our independence. Collaboration with the Manhattan Community Network, that's fine, but we have to be independent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan. I'm going to give Dean Loren a chance to make his opening statement. He didn't unmute when we called on him originally. So if you're there, Mr. Loren, speak up now. Otherwise, we're going to continue. All right, here we go. We're going to move on to the meat of the program, the actual debate. The format consists of assigning one topic to one candidate as determined by the initial random sequence and allowing that candidate 2 minutes to develop an answer. All other candidates following the order defined by the initial random sequence get 30 seconds each to comment. This structure iterates through all candidates until all have had the opportunity to address a topic in depth. So, Cerene, the first topic is to you. What are the strengths and weaknesses of WBAI's programming? And should local station board members be involved in determining programming? Please unmute yourself and you have 2 minutes.
Okay, so the job of the local station board, as the bylaws define it, is to ensure that, with regard to programming, is to ensure that there are clear, transparent, collaborative, respectful discussions around how program changes happen, around how program evaluations happen. So when program after program after program shows up on the air or disappears from the air without any process that anyone is aware of, that's a problem. That's a primary job and a primary failure of the current LSB. They actually give the program director sometimes 5 minutes to report and 5 minutes to take questions at local station board meetings. That's a farce. There are huge swaths of our area communities that are not addressed in our programming. We barely have international programming. That's the problem. Additionally, there's supposed to be a community needs assessment process, which is what the Community Advisory Board has been assigned to do. But the Community Advisory Board itself is completely illegitimate. There was never an open call for membership. They have meetings that I believe they have only now begun to record using Zoom. But where previously, you show up, they actually turned off the recording mechanism so that people can, I can't speak to the intent, but these are supposed to be public meetings. There's no recording of the meetings. So if you don't happen to be free on the afternoon they're doing it, you don't know what's being discussed. There's no data that was ever provided with regard to what they're doing to determine the needs of the folks in our listening community. So I would say that the LSB has miserably failed in that regard. And there's a bogus motion that was passed by the LSB claiming that the CAB did all sorts of things that it did not.
Thank you. Michael, if you would please unmute yourself, you have 30 seconds to respond to that.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of good news about the programming on WBAI, and our job is to get that good news out, and that will help us build audience. I think we have opportunities for improving programming, but at the moment there's surely more than enough than I can listen to myself. The LSB is involved. We all have access to management and the program director for input, and they regularly show up at our meetings. But we can't do it. It's not we can't build a camel. We can only see that they do their job.
Okay. I understand that Dean Loren has figured out the technical issues which he was experiencing. So Mr. Loren, if you'd like to take 30 seconds, you can have them now and respond to the question that is on the table. Well, perhaps he's still struggling. All right, Eleanor, would you please respond to that question that was put to Cerene?
I agree with what Cerene was saying. And I'd also like to suggest that perhaps we might initiate a program council with listener members, perhaps appointed by the local station board, to devote itself to evaluating individual programs and promoting listener participation in program evaluation and improvement.
Thank you. Catherine, please unmute.
Yeah, well, BAI is only as good as its programming. So having the best programming possible is an ultimate goal that everyone involved in the station needs to have. And I would agree with that whatever will help improve the programming and broaden our listenership is going to be a win-win for everyone involved. So I think that whatever we can do to improve is a good thing.
Thank you. The next question actually is queued up for Dean Loren. So we'll give him one more chance to let us know that he is here, and I will put that question to him. If not, I'm going to move on to the third question. Mr. Loren, are you here? All right, moving on. Michael, this is your topic. In your opinion, what is the most important role or responsibility that the local station board has? And how should roles or responsibilities be modified to improve the function of the local station board? You have 2 minutes.
Saying that there's a single most important function, I'm not sure that really works. Sometimes you think you're going to be doing one thing. In the last 3 years, the feedback we've gotten is that we've accomplished more than any local station board has in a 3-year period. But that was in the face of 3 consecutive crises. So when those crises came up, they were the priority. There was a shutdown of the station. And there were questions about whether the local station board was even conceived to exist at the time. And then there were 2 successive attacks with the anti-democracy bylaw referendums that wanted to seize power and probably ultimately destroy WBAI, take it off the air. So we fended off all of those 3 things successfully during the past 3 years and got more done than I think in any other prior 3-year period. But that means evaluating what, well, one of the things we do, by the way, is we send good people to the Pacifica National Board. We sent excellent people. So the Pacifica National Board has also been accomplishing a lot, especially financially. I mean, the work of James Sagerton as the treasurer and getting all of our audits squared away and beginning to rein in expenses. WBAI is already the most financially efficient of all of the stations in the network. So if we can just bring some of the other stations in line with what we've accomplished at WBAI and the examples of how to run things efficiently that we can use. But also, the programming is very important. But we cannot be bureaucratic. The idea that you can't make program changes except through a bureaucracy.
All right, thank you. Eleanor, if you would please unmute yourself, you have 30 seconds to respond.
The twin responsibilities of the local station board are the approval and oversight of an annual budget proposal from management that's forwarded to the Pacifica National Board, and the power to recommend a pool of candidates for the general manager position, as well as to conduct an annual evaluation of the general manager that can recommend areas for improvement or even lead to a recommendation for dismissal.
All right. Next, we will hear from Katherine for 30 seconds.
Well, I think any board, the importance of operating as a board and a local station board is to be able to achieve goals, work together as a board. Disharmony and obstruction and infighting are the last things that WBAI and Pacifica needs. Unity, we're faced with huge alternatives out there. We need unity.
All right. Cerene, if you would unmute yourself, please, you have 30 seconds.
Thanks. There are many responsibilities of the LSB. I would say that if I had to choose one, I would say it is holding management to account and doing evaluations. If you hold management to account, it means you actually have a role. You actually review the budget, review the spending. We are not the most fiscally advanced anything. Our proposed budget is 6 figures in the negative. We are currently 6 figures in the negative. We are at least $30,000 overspending every month.
Thank you. All right. The next question will go to Eleanor, and I'm going to give you the question that I think is an important one that we would have put to Dean Loren if he had been here. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the existing models of fundraising at WBAI and Pacifica? Please propose alternative fundraising ideas or models. Think about the strategy and timeline for the implementation of your alternatives. So please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
You're asking about financial issues?
Yes, that's the question. Yes.
While the extortionate Empire State Realty Trust contract we were bound to after 9/11 for our transmitter created a disastrous debt that has been recently refinanced and which is in the process of being retired with the help of bequests. The fundamental problem is that our audience and support base has shrunk. We need to identify and engage with communities, artists, and activists who will help rebuild and expand that base. We can't rely on foundation grants or corporate underwriting that seek to control the topics we address or the content we broadcast. We need to find new ways to provide content that are more consistent with the media habits of a new generation. As for fundraising, a listener suggested we call up all the people who used to give $150 or more, who've stopped doing so, to ask what turned them off and how we could make it right. That might give us some ideas. However, we've tapped out many of our listeners and exhausted the old model of on-air marathon fund drives. We could also monetize alternative means of distributing content, including podcasting, YouTube videos, and other platforms, with those who cannot afford it allowed to request being able to listen for free. Our on-air fundraising needs to emphasize the unique value and community service we provide.
Thank you very much. Katherine, would you please unmute yourself? You have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, well, again, the funding and the fundraising to me are closely tied to the programming, because if people want to listen to BAI, then, you know, our listener base expands and our donor base will expand. It just will as a function of it. So I say focus on excellence in programming, expanding our base, and yes, using all the alternative platforms that are available. Also, you know, there's a lot of money out there sloshing around. Did you get any of that?
I heard everything except the last couple of sentences. I suppose I can't speak for everyone else.
Okay, that's fine. Well, you've got the gist of it. That's fine.
Okay, so Michael, would you unmute and respond, please?
Yeah, we make more money, do better in fundraising with how we use our airtime than with anything else. And Katherine is right that the other important thing is the bigger the audience, the better the income. In terms of what we're doing, we now have instituted the rotating 52-week fundraising slots, which avoids decreasing our audience, allows us to increase our audience, and we have a tremendous opportunities in tremendous ways to make and use this better.
Thank you. Cerene, would you please unmute yourself and respond?
WBAI's biggest problem, and we have several, but our biggest problem is that people don't know that we're here. People don't know that we're still here, and there are people who have never heard about it. That's a problem. We need a real publicity blast, you know, and you do that by forming collaborations with other people. You do that by getting a social media core, you know, get a high school class, get a college class, make BAI a project for a college class. And in fact, they will share the message that we exist. And we're not broadcasting to the people who are in this.
Thank you very much. All right, this is the final question for this round. Katherine, this is your topic. Please define listener democracy. What is your view on listener democracy? Do you feel listener democracy is working well or poorly at BAI, WBAI, and Pacifica? Suggest ways that we can improve listener democracy. Unmute yourself, please, and you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think listener democracy is working fairly well. I think we averted the catastrophe of the very anti-democratic bylaws referendum. So I think our listener democracy is working reasonably. Obviously, it could be better because, but it's hard to get everybody to speak up when if there sometimes listeners may not have the wherewithal to actually know how to propose an idea. So I think engaging listeners program by program will work. You know, just always make sure that there are the program host, that there's constant, not boring, but constant reminders that listeners should call in about their concerns, and you know, good and bad. And it's democracy, even our national democracy. It's a sort of it's a growing animal. It doesn't stop, and in fact, it can turn into a monster if it's not cultivated properly. So I think that the listener democracy needs nurturing. It needs to be cultivated, and it should be through the many channels that have already been mentioned, via the programming, via social media, via very good suggestions, Cerene, you know, the getting students involved, that gets across the different generations. We do need younger listeners. Personally, I may be delusional, but I feel that radio is going to kind of come back a little bit because people will be very tired of the internet, especially when the search engines don't really deliver what they're meant to anymore.
Thank you. Cerene, please unmute. You have 30 seconds.
So I was a long time BAI enthusiast. I've been around WBAI since 1981. Thank you, Samari. And I am one of the primary writers for Pacifica Fightback. So many listeners would have gotten our e-blast over the past couple of years as we're dealing with the attempt to unravel Pacifica with undemocratic bylaw changes. And as such, I would say that the ability of members to have a say and to be informed is crucial.
Thank you. Michael, you have 30 seconds, so please unmute and respond.
Listener democracy, accountability to the listeners is what has been preventing the privatizing takeover of Pacifica and WBAI, which is why it's been under attack with these bylaw referendum proposals. We have a listener democracy that is a representative democracy, so the listeners are represented principally by electing us to the local station board, and then we elect to the national board. But we also get input. We have public comment at every LSB meeting, and there are many channels for input continuum.
Thank you. Eleanor, please unmute. You have 30 seconds to respond.
Listeners vote to elect listener delegates to the LSB, but are often not well enough informed about the issues. There should be regular on-air opportunities for listeners to hear from and communicate with Pacifica National Board directors, as well as the LSB and general manager. Candidate forums need to be held on air with an opportunity for listener questions in advance of ballots going out for LSB elections. There need to be on-air announcement of governance committees and meetings and how listeners can participate.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Could I ask one question? When I was being asked my question earlier, I had another thought, and since I ended with oodles of time, I wondered if I could please add it.
I would say I'm willing to give you 30 seconds.
Okay, as to how we can try and get more money, which we always need, The Pacifica National Board needs to emphasize collaboration with our affiliates in production of long-form audiovisual documentaries and miniseries that can produce meaningful investigative journalism and coverage of significant national issues that will begin to set the agenda for the national discourse. The PNB can also encourage the monetization of content from the stations and the Pacifica Radio archives to produce an income stream for the
Eleanor.
stations and the foundation.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. I'm sure you're going to get many more opportunities to speak up in response to the next portion of the debate, which is a call in from listeners. So listeners.
I'm sorry, this is Cerene.
Yes.
Dean Loren says he's been trying to get unmuted.
Listeners can now call in at 212-209-2877. I'll repeat that, 212-209-2877 to ask a question of candidates. Each caller will have 30 seconds and each candidate will have 30 seconds to respond. We will take as many questions as the time permits. So if we have a caller, we'll hear from the first caller.
Hello, Renee? Hello?
Hello, a caller. You're speaking to the moderator. My name is Kate Doran. I'm with the League of Women Voters. Do you have a question for a candidate?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, my name is Dean Loren. I'm being blocked from this call. And so I'd like to say about the mergers and acquisition, and Renee doesn't know how to work the machine. I've been waiting to do this, and I didn't even mute myself. So the problem is, I would like another opportunity to get on the block because Renee has blocked me from this call. And, you know, as a candidate, I feel outraged that this is going on.
Mr. Loren,
there is agenda.
This is Steve Zogner. I'm a local supervisor. We're not blocking you at all. You have to stay muted while you're not speaking so that we can hear the other.
Yes, but I never muted myself, so how could I?
You have to unmute yourself when it's your time to speak. If you can't do that on the phone that you're with, then we'll just leave you unmuted for the rest of it.
So what? I tried *6.
Okay. Well, yeah. Let's just continue, please.
Are we continuing with Mr. Dean Loren, or are we waiting for another? All right, I'm going to take a question that I have written here.
Hello, Renee.
I'm going to take a question that was submitted over the past week by a WBAI listener. And the first question is, what is your opinion of the proposed asset sale, mostly of WBAI, that some members of Pacifica are proposing? Which assets would you support or oppose monetizing? And we're going to start with you, Cerene, and you have 30 seconds.
I'm opposed to the sale of any of our signals. I think the last time we were really out in the streets en masse was in 1999 when a memo was leaked about a plan to sell WBAI. WBAI is an incredibly valuable piece of property. It's in the middle of the commercial dial, unlike any of the other Pacifica stations. None of our stations should be sold. And I expect that when we organize with strong local boards that are connected to the community, and we use the Pacifica communications policy to have the listeners hear from the people they elect on a regular, ongoing basis, we won't be dealing with this stuff.
Thank you, Cerene. Dean, if you are here and you can unmute yourself, we would be happy to have you respond to that listener question. All right, we're going to move on to Michael. Would you please unmute yourself? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I've been fighting the sale and the shrinkage of the New York City public libraries. And when the proposals to sell off assets of WBAI came along, we saw that all of the parallels. The accountability, the station must remain accountable to the listeners. I know that some of these proposals have been phrased in terms of partnerships, but that's not what they really were. Partnerships are fine, you know, Louis Armstrong Museum, Jalopy. There's lots of opportunities that we should be exploring, but accountability to the listeners must be maintained.
Thank you. Thank you. Eleanor, you have 30 seconds.
Of course, we can't sell any of the 5 stations. The only thing we should be selling, if anything, would be content from the stations and the Pacifica radio archives, and exploring the development of a Pacifica internet radio station with original local content, as well as other Pacifica material across the country to improve the value of the Pacifica brand. If we sell any of the stations, if we could, I don't know that it's allowed. It would be terrible.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm advised that we have a caller on the line, so I'm calling on that listener to ask their question.
All right, it's Russell. It's Russell. Russell.
Oh, all right. Russell has a question. Do you want to direct it to any particular candidate, Russell?
So Katherine O'Sullivan, is she available?
I believe
Yes.
so.
Yes.
Okay, my question then real quick is, listeners can be heard through the callers, and I know the callers aren't representative of all the listeners because usually it's obnoxious people that call, but Zabby, another listener, has a proposal that listeners be allowed for $250 an hour to produce an hour of their own show on WBAI. Of course, it would have to be edited, but I'd like to know what Catherine thinks of the idea of opening up content to the listeners directly for $250 an hour, because I know a lot of people on BAI have been getting grants to produce shows, and that's not disclosed. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I would need to know a lot more about the details, because I sort of thought that the community network was supposed to cover this, that, you know, that they were, if people wanted to just do a raw program, that would be where they would go. However, I mean, if somebody had a really great idea for a program, I'm not sure that we should be in the rental business, but I wouldn't rule it out. But I would need a lot more details about where it was going and who its audience was aiming at. So I'm not going to give a yes or no answer to that. I would need more information.
All right. We want to give our other candidates an opportunity to respond to that question. Would you like to start first, Michael?
Yeah, I don't know, $250. I haven't tried to, even start doing the math on that, but we have the 52-week rotating, the rotating fundraising slots. So these are hours that appear in different places. These are great opportunities for putting on new experimental programming. It could be something provided by a listener, but the programming that we put on should be good. It shouldn't be something that's going to drive away, make one listener happy and drive away the other listeners. But any listener who can be doing great programming should be on the air.
All right. Eleanor?
I am against this idea. We're trying to maintain some degree of professionality, and Manhattan Neighborhood Network is where people can go to put on whatever they like for free.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Cerene?
Okay, so I think we have had people who've had on guest spots, be a guest DJ. I know that I think Tony Ryan has done it, and David Kenny has done it. I don't know that it's been done recently, but that's a very different proposal from what I'm hearing here. I think that if WBAI wants to go down that road, it needs to be done very carefully, looking at who's represented, what perspectives are represented, represented because we are what we put on the air, and that already makes a number of us uncomfortable.
Thank you, Cerene. We do have one more caller, I'm advised, standing by. We're going to take one more listener question, and then we're going to move on to closing statements. So we're ready for you, caller.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Well, I'd like to say I tune into the Community Advisory Board meetings, not today, but I tune into LSB meetings. And I will say, you know, I point things out that are right there and true. Cerene is the only candidate I heard her call into the LSB meeting who speaks openly about equality and fairness and follow the rules. The only one. You tune into a meeting, no one addresses this but her. And that's what I wanted to share today because it's the truth. Thank you.
I didn't hear a question there, so perhaps we could move on to closing statements. Ready for that? Right. So thank you very much, candidates. That does it for the debate questions. Now each candidate will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. Cerene, by the random selection, you are up first. You have 1 minute.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, I hear you very clearly. I presume the others can as well.
Okay, thanks. So I want to clarify something that I keep hearing batted about. I think there's a lot of confusion. I wish people would actually do some research before they attempt to speak authoritatively on matters. The PSOA, which is a Programming Service Operating Agreement, or which is not a, quote, sale of the signal or lease of the signal, was proposed in 2019 and in 2018, and even before that. In fact, the Pacifica National Board in 2013 put out a request for proposals for a PSOA for WBAI. So those who need information on that, please go to justiceunity.org, justiceunity.org, see what we're talking about, because some of the stuff you're hearing is just incorrect. Please visit also Pacifica Fight Back, because the pacificafightback.org, because as I said, the folks who came after us under the guise of a bylaws referendum to turn Pacifica over to the Democratic National Party are still here, and they will be back with another referendum before the year is out.
Thank you, Cerene. Thank you very kindly. All right, Michael, you have 1 minute for a closing statement.
Yeah, briefly, when it comes to Manhattan Neighborhood Network, they were asked to submit a proposal. They never did, perhaps because whatever they submitted might be too frightening in terms of the relinquishment of listener accountability. But when they submit a proposal, we'll look at it. We have a great future ahead of us, and I think a growing audience future ahead of us that is in the tradition of our decades of meeting the Pacifica mission statement. I do believe that it involves a recentering, not eschewing the internet, but a recentering on WBAI of what WBAI can do as a terrestrial radio station and avoid the censorship of the internet, provide protection. We can be a shelter for the shows that are currently being shut down, and I don't know what's going to come along that's going to be worse. But there are tremendous successes in alternative, less progressive media. They are doing better than the cable networks in many respects. We can recenter much of this happening at Pacifica and WBAI.
Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from Eleanor. You have 1 minute for a closing statement.
A PSOA stands for Public Service Operating Agreement, and PSOA with Manhattan Neighborhood Network would take away our programming freedom. So as Michael was saying, Maybe they never made a concrete offer because they knew it would be unacceptable. I am against such a thing. I am for our working with Manhattan Neighborhood Network without a PSOA in order to branch into audiovisual TV. And I also wanted to mention about programming that the removal of programs and addition of them and schedule modification has often been too arbitrary. Everything is in the program director's hands. Recently, both a paid staff member and an unpaid staff member were separately criticized in a fundraising stars politics. They were treated differently. I'll also mention I'm a former station unpaid staff member, since I forgot to do that before.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. And finally, we will hear from Katherine, your closing statement. You have 1 minute, so if you would please unmute.
Well, I agree that BAI is going to become increasingly important as a terrestrial radio station. The censorship on the internet is growing, and we need independent voices. We need to be a place where community can get a voice in the ultimately unsuccessful inward legal action fight against the inward rezoning. The only place we got any airtime was on BAI. So I would be, if I am elected, I will be determined to keep our independence, whatever that means. Collaborate, sure. Partner, sure. But independent and accountable to our listeners. That is ultimately what we are. And, you know, so I say vote for me in the Indy slate. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm being asked to remind listeners, WBAI listeners, that we will take questions again in the second round of debates. That'll be about halfway through, or approximately 3:20 p.m. So keep listening and be ready with your questions for the next round of candidates. Now, thank you for listening to WBAI's debate series for the 2021 Local Board Delegate Elections. Again, my name is Kate Doran. I'm the election specialist for the League of Women Voters of the City of New York. During this first segment, we were joined by Cerene Roberts, Michael D.D. White, Eleanor Elizabeth Forman, and Katherine O'Sullivan. Visit elections.pacifica.org for all questions and to file a ballot request. Make sure to cast your ballot before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, October 15, 2021. And I'm going to remind you again, listeners, of that number where you can call in later. It's 212-209-2877. Thank you very much.